Evans Fordyce Carlson is a man defined by a restless spirit and a rigid sense of honor, qualities that emerge early in his life within the small towns of New England. Born in 1896 as the son of a strict Congregationalist minister, he grows up in an environment where hymns, Bible readings, and high moral expectations are the daily standard. He often feels like a disappointment to his pious father and finds himself at odds with his mother, whose aristocratic lineage and insistence on proper behavior irritate his independent nature. This internal friction leads him to flee his home at the age of 11 with only a few dollars in his pocket, seeking to prove his self-reliance. Though illness forces him back after a grueling stint in a match factory, the experience leaves a permanent mark. When his father tells him that his flight was a sin against his family, the boy leans against the church wall and weeps in shame for the last time in his life, resolving from that moment forward to master his emotions and his destiny. By the age of 14, a suspension from school provides the final excuse he needs to leave for good. He vows not to return for 7 years, a promise he keeps as he wanders through Vermont and New Jersey, working on farms and railroads. He is a voracious reader, consuming the works of Emerson and Jack London, which fuel his desire for a life of adventure and rugged individualism. His formal education ends abruptly when he quits night school, but his education in the world is just beginning. At 16, he stands nearly 6 feet tall and weighs 150 pounds, enabling him to bluff his way past an Army recruiter by claiming to be 22. His parents, informed of the enlistment, decide he must learn the consequences of his choices and allow him to remain in the service. The Army becomes his forge. He discovers a natural aptitude for military life, rising to the rank of sergeant with unusual speed. His service takes him to the Philippines and Hawaii, where he encounters the vastness of the Pacific and experiences his first stirrings of animosity toward the Japanese Empire. He witnesses the harsh exploitation of women in Nagasaki during a transport stop, a sight that repels him and plants the seeds of a lifelong grievance. Despite his success, his integrity is tested when a commanding officer offers him a commission as a second lieutenant. Knowing he is too young for the rank, Carlson confesses his true age. The officer is so impressed by his honesty that he keeps the secret, though the commission is deferred. Carlson spends his off-duty hours mastering shorthand, typing, and military tactics, preparing for a future he cannot yet see. After a brief return to civilian life in 1915, during which he works 20-hour days in construction, he is called back to active duty when revolutionary leader Pancho Villa raids across the border. He marries Dorothy Seckham just before being sent to Texas, where he serves as an artillery instructor. The entry of the United States into the First World War finally brings him the commission he sought. He reaches the rank of captain and sails for France in 1918, but the war ends just 3 days after his arrival. This lack of combat experience leaves him with a lingering sense of incompletion, a warrior who has never seen a battle. Disillusioned with the prospect of a stagnant peacetime military and struggling with a marriage that has become a mistake for both parties, he resigns his commission and returns to California to work as a traveling salesman. For 2 years, Carlson drifts through the business world, selling canned goods across the American West. He makes money but finds the work humiliating and soul-crushing. To a man of his temperament, growing old without achievement is a slow death. At 26, he realizes the business world is not his calling, but the thought of returning to the Army at a lower rank than his peers is intolerable. Instead, he turns to the Marine Corps, enlisting as a private in 1922. His prior experience and expert marksmanship quickly propel him back into the officer ranks. At Quantico, he becomes a local hero when he uses mule-drawn ambulances to rescue a supply train bogged down by mountain storms, earning the lifelong favor of General Smedley Butler. Carlson understands that in the insular world of the military, a successful career requires social standing. He mingles with Washington society, joins elite clubs, and eventually meets Atoll Sawyer at a tea dance in Puerto Rico. She is charming, well-connected, and the perfect partner for an ambitious officer. However, his professional path remains rocky. A failure in flight school is a bitter disappointment, but it redirects his focus toward China, a place he believes will be the center of future global conflict. In 1927, he finally arrives in Shanghai as an operations officer. While the heat and slow pace of occupation duty initially wear him down, his appointment as an intelligence officer revitalizes him. He immerses himself in Chinese history, politics, and language, becoming a scholar soldier who views the Chinese people with a rare empathy. His tactical education reaches a turning point in Nicaragua in 1930. Assigned to command a group of local National Guard troops, he insists on treating them as equals, refusing to ride a horse while they walk. He learns the brutal reality of guerrilla warfare, discovering how insurgents blend into the local population and use the jungle to their advantage. He realizes that small mobile forces carrying only essential supplies are far more effective than large, static concentrations of troops. His personal courage becomes legendary among his peers when he rides 20 miles alone through enemy territory disguised as a native, a Thompson submachine gun hidden under his serape. After surviving malaria and providing heroic leadership during a devastating earthquake in Managua, he is awarded the Navy Cross. Returning to China for a second tour in 1933, Carlson seeks the real heart of the country in Peeping. He serves as an adjutant to the American legation, but his true work is intellectual. He teaches classes on Chinese culture to Westerners and implements a revolutionary leadership style among the legation guards. By explaining the importance of their mission and treating the local population with respect, he reduces discipline problems in the unit by 90%. He concludes that when soldiers understand the context of their actions, they develop a profound sense of responsibility. This lesson, combined with his Nicaraguan experiences, becomes the foundation for his future Raider units. The most pivotal connection of his career begins in 1936 at a luncheon with Eleanor and Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The president and the Marine captain share a passionate interest in China, forging a bond that bypasses all traditional military protocol. Carlson is eventually assigned to the Marine Guard at the President's Retreat in Warm Springs, where he and Roosevelt spend long hours discussing the growing threat of Japan. When Carlson prepares for his third tour in China in 1937, the President gives him a secret assignment: write directly to the White House with unofficial reports on the situation. Over the next 2 years, Carlson sends 17 detailed letters that bypass the chain of command, infuriating his superiors and planting the seeds of suspicion that will later haunt him. In China, Carlson witnesses the Japanese invasion of Shanghai. He is fascinated and repelled by the pageantry of death, often exposing himself to machine gun fire to gain a better vantage point. His worldview undergoes a radical shift when he meets American journalists who introduce him to the Chinese Communist 8th Route Army. Driven by an inner urge to see how they resist the superior Japanese forces, he embarks on a 2,000-mile journey through the Chinese hinterland. He spends 51 days behind enemy lines, marching over mountains through the bitter winter. He meets Mao Tse-tung and is struck by the man's humble, visionary nature. He observes an army where officers and men live as equals, unified by a philosophy of ethical indoctrination. They call this way of working together Gung Ho, or work in harmony. Each soldier knows exactly why he is fighting and is willing to endure any hardship for the cause. Carlson is convinced that the American military must adopt these methods and that the United States must stop arming Japan with scrap metal and oil. He knows that speaking out will end his career, but he feels a moral responsibility to tell the truth. He resigns from the Marine Corps in 1939, sacrificing his pension and his security to embark on a public speaking tour. He warns a skeptical nation that war is coming and that the same supplies being sold to Japan will soon be used against American boys. His warnings are largely ignored by the government, and his association with leftist figures leads many to label him a communist sympathizer. By 1941, he is divorced, nearly broke, and deeply depressed, unable to see a future for himself or his ideas. The attack on Pearl Harbor changes everything. The nation is suddenly desperate for the expertise Carlson possesses. Against the opposition of the Marine hierarchy, he is returned to active duty as a major. He is given the extraordinary opportunity to form an elite commando unit, the 2nd Marine Raider Battalion, with the President's son, James Roosevelt, as his executive officer. The Marine leadership is terrified of this independent force and creates a rival 1st Raider Battalion under the traditionalist Merritt Edson to counterbalance Carlson's influence. Undeterred, Carlson begins recruiting his men, seeking only those with a deep, personal motivation to fight. He tells every applicant that he can promise them nothing but hardship, and that in battle, they will ask no mercy and give no mercy. The training begins at Jacques Farm, a dilapidated chicken ranch south of San Diego. Carlson transforms the muddy, manure-filled field into a crucible. He discards the traditional military caste system, announcing to his 1,000 volunteers that officers and men will eat the same rations, live in the same tents, and undergo the same grueling physical demands. He leads from the front, setting the pace on 70-mile overnight hikes and 50-mile daily marches through the mountains. The men carry a restricted diet of rice and raisins, and are issued high firepower weaponry, including the new M1 Garand and Thompson submachine guns. Carlson organizes them into 3-man fire teams, a radical departure from Marine doctrine. Through his Friday-night Gung Ho meetings, he creates a democratic forum where every private is free to question his orders and voice concerns. This fosters a sense of brotherhood and shared purpose that turns a collection of individuals into a unified weapon. They call themselves raiders, and they wear shorter field jackets and Oregon logging boots, deviations from regulation that further alienate Carlson from the Marine brass. By the spring of 1942, the battalion is ready. They move to Hawaii and then to Midway, itching for combat as the war in the Pacific turns increasingly grim. Admiral Nimitz, under pressure from the White House to strike back, selects Makin Atoll as the target for a commando raid. The mission is designed as a diversion for the invasion of Guadalcanal and a morale booster for the American public. Carlson is allocated 2 large submarines, the Nautilus and the Argonaut, to transport a force of 200 men. He worries about the safety of James Roosevelt, fearing that the death or capture of the president's son would be a catastrophic propaganda victory for Japan, but the president himself intervenes to ensure his son is allowed to go. The raiders spend their final days in Hawaii practicing landings in the crashing surf, memorizing the layout of an island they have not yet been named. On August 8, 1942, the 221 selected raiders board the submarines in the darkness of Pearl Harbor. The journey is a miserable 8-day passage through sweltering, cramped, and foul-smelling hulls. The men sleep in 4-tier bunks with only inches of space, breathing recycled air and enduring overwhelming humidity. They help the crews with chores to pass the time and receive their final briefings as the submarines approach the Gilberts. Carlson tells them to kill the enemy and take no prisoners, as the submarines have no room for captives. On the night of August 17th, the submarines reach their destination. The sea is raging with 15-foot waves and a howling wind, far worse than anything they encountered in training. Despite the treacherous conditions, the order is given to launch. This is the irreversible turning point, the moment Carlson and his men step off the steel decks of the submarines and into the volatile surf, leaving the safety of the known world behind for the uncertainty of their first battle. Before we move on, please subscribe to our channel, Operation Zero. Don't forget to hit like and share this with fellow audio documentary enthusiasts, especially those who love military history. Let's continue. The churning Pacific surf becomes a chaotic barrier as the raiders struggle to bring their rubber boats toward the shoreline of Makin Atoll. In the pitch-black darkness and howling wind, the outboard motors fail almost immediately, choked by salt water and sand. This mechanical failure forces the men to paddle through the massive swells, their small craft tossing violently as they lose sight of one another in the spray. Amidst the roar of the ocean, a significant navigational error occurs. Lieutenant Oscar Petras and his small group of men land on a separate beach from the main body, leaving the primary force under Carlson's immediate command to land in a concentrated group elsewhere. As the first boats scrape against the coral and sand, the silence of the night is shattered by an accidental discharge from a raider's weapon. The element of surprise is lost, and the Japanese garrison is instantly alerted to the presence of an invading force. Carlson quickly organizes his men on the beach, the reality of combat replacing the theoretical exercises of training. They move into the dense palm groves as dawn breaks, and the air is suddenly filled with the sharp crack of Japanese sniper fire from the treetops. The raiders respond with the devastating firepower of their automatic weapons, but the hidden enemy is difficult to pin down. The first major casualty occurs when Sergeant Clyde Thomason, a man of immense bravery and a leader among his peers, is killed while trying to locate an enemy position. His death sends a shockwave through the ranks, yet it also solidifies their resolve. Throughout the morning, the raiders face a series of fierce counterattacks. The Japanese soldiers, often hidden in the thick undergrowth, launch localized charges accompanied by screams, but the disciplined fire of the Raider 3-man teams proves superior. As the sun rises higher, the situation becomes increasingly complex. Japanese aircraft begin to circle the island, diving low to strafe the beaches and the inland positions. The raiders are forced to hug the ground, seeking cover under the roots of tropical trees as bombs explode nearby. Carlson remains a calm, visible presence, moving between the lines and offering encouragement, seemingly indifferent to the fire directed at him. His executive officer, James Roosevelt, also demonstrates significant courage, managing communications and coordination under intense pressure. However, the intelligence regarding the size of the Japanese force is conflicting. Reports suggest a much larger garrison than originally anticipated, and Carlson begins to worry about the possibility of his men being overwhelmed or trapped on the island. The most difficult phase of the mission begins as the light fades on the first day. Carlson, concerned about the arrival of Japanese reinforcements and the physical exhaustion of his men, orders a withdrawal to the submarines. The return to the sea becomes a nightmare. The tide has changed, and the surf has grown even more treacherous. As the men attempt to launch their rubber boats, the heavy waves flip the craft over and over, dumping exhausted soldiers and their equipment into the churning water. Many of the outboard motors remain useless, and the physical strength required to paddle against the incoming sea is more than the men can muster. After several hours of desperate struggle, only a small fraction of the force manages to reach the waiting submarines. The majority of the raiders, including Carlson, are washed back onto the beach, shivering, soaked, and scattered along the shoreline. In the dark hours of that night, a profound sense of despair settles over the remaining force. They are trapped on a hostile island, their weapons fouled by sand, their boats mostly lost or damaged, and an unknown number of Japanese soldiers still lurking in the jungle. It is during this low point that a controversial incident occurs. A junior officer, believing the situation to be hopeless and wishing to save the remaining men from slaughter, drafts a note suggesting a willingness to discuss terms of surrender. While the details of Carlson's direct involvement in the note remain a subject of historical debate, the document is sent into the darkness with a Japanese-speaking messenger. The messenger is killed by a stray bullet before he can return, and the Japanese commander on the island never officially receives the communication. This moment of extreme vulnerability serves as a stark contrast to the gung-ho spirit Carlson has championed, illustrating the psychological toll of isolation and perceived defeat. As morning breaks on the second day, the situation shifts once again. The raiders discover that the Japanese garrison has actually been decimated by the previous day's fighting. The expected counterattack never materializes because there are very few Japanese left to execute it. Regaining their initiative, the raiders sweep across the atoll, destroying radio stations, burning supplies, and eliminating the final pockets of resistance. They find evidence of the havoc they have caused, including the bodies of Japanese officers who apparently took their own lives rather than face capture. With the help of native islanders, the raiders manage to repair enough boats and lash them together into a makeshift raft. Using a line stretched from the shore to the submarines, they finally succeed in navigating the surf and boarding the vessels. The return journey to Pearl Harbor is a mixture of relief and somber reflection. The raiders have accomplished their mission, but the cost has been high. During the roll call on the submarines, a devastating discovery is made. 9 men are missing. In the chaos of the night withdrawal and the shifting surf, these raiders were left behind on the island. While there is a brief discussion about returning to search for them, the submarines are low on fuel and air, and the risk of Japanese air and sea patrols is too great. The decision to leave is a heavy burden that Carlson carries for the rest of his life. It is later learned that these 9 men were captured by the Japanese, treated with some level of respect by the local commander for their bravery, but eventually executed on orders from higher authority. Upon their arrival in Hawaii, the raiders are greeted as national heroes. The American public, hungry for good news after a string of defeats, embraces the story of the Makin raid. The media focuses on the daring nature of the mission and the presence of the president's son, turning Carlson into a household name. However, within the high command of the Marine Corps, the reaction is far more critical. Professional officers are skeptical of Carlson's unconventional methods and his egalitarian leadership style. They view the gung-ho philosophy as a threat to traditional military discipline and are suspicious of Carlson's political connections. Despite the public acclaim, the internal machinery of the military begins to turn against him. The raiders are not allowed to rest for long. As the struggle for the Solomon Islands intensifies, they are deployed to Guadalcanal. The situation on the island is a stalemate of attrition, with American forces holding a small perimeter around the airfield while the Japanese control the surrounding jungle and mountains. The raiders are initially assigned to a secondary landing at Atoll Bay to protect the construction of a new airfield, but the terrain proves unsuitable. Admiral Richmond Kelly Turner, the ambitious and often abrasive naval commander, then gives Carlson a new and far more dangerous mission. The raiders are ordered to move inland, circle behind the Japanese positions, and conduct a 30-day patrol to disrupt enemy lines and locate the elusive Tokyo Express landing sites. This mission, which becomes known as the Long Patrol, is the ultimate test of Carlson's tactical theories. Moving into the dense, primary rainforest, the raiders leave behind the support of heavy artillery and supply lines. They carry only what they can fit in their packs, supplemented by occasional airdrops of rice, raisins, and chocolate. The environment is as much of an enemy as the Japanese. The heat is oppressive, the humidity is constant, and the jungle floor is a morass of mud and rotting vegetation. Within days, nearly every man is suffering from some form of tropical disease. Malaria, dysentery, and fungal infections, commonly known as jungle rot, begin to eat away at their physical strength. Despite the hardships, the raiders prove to be masters of the jungle. Following Carlson's lead, They move with incredible stealth, often surprising Japanese units in their own camps. Carlson's insistence on equality remains firm. He sleeps on the ground like his men and shares the same meager rations. During the nightly Gung Ho meetings, even in the middle of enemy territory, he encourages his soldiers to voice their observations and suggestions. This collaborative approach pays off in combat. In a series of sharp, violent engagements at the upper reaches of the Lunga River, the raiders demonstrate their superior marksmanship and fire discipline. They ambush Japanese columns, destroy supply caches, and gather invaluable intelligence on enemy movements. The physical toll of the patrol is staggering. Men lose 20 or 30 pounds in a matter of weeks. Their uniforms rot off their bodies, and their boots disintegrate in the constant moisture. Carlson himself, now in his late 40s, shows the strain of the grueling pace, yet he refuses to slow down or accept special treatment. The raiders kill nearly 500 Japanese soldiers during the 30 days, while losing only 16 of their own men. It is a tactical masterpiece of guerrilla warfare, proving that a small, highly motivated, and lightly equipped force can operate effectively deep within enemy territory. As the patrol draws to a close, the raiders emerge from the jungle into the American perimeter at the Lunga River. They are a haunting sight. Gaunt, bearded men with hollow eyes and ragged clothing, looking more like ghosts than a modern military unit. They have achieved everything asked of them and more, providing the first clear picture of the Japanese strength in the interior of the island. However, the reception they receive from the Marine Command on Guadalcanal is cold. General Alexander Vandergrift and his staff, while acknowledging the intelligence gathered, are increasingly disturbed by the cult of personality surrounding Carlson. They see the raiders as an elite group that has become too independent, and they view Carlson's public fame with resentment. The tension reaches a breaking point when the raiders are ordered to rest and refit. Carlson expects his men to be given time to recover from their illnesses and injuries, but the military hierarchy is already planning the next phase of the war, one that has no place for his unconventional ideas. The political protection he once enjoyed from the White House begins to wane as the war grows in scale, and the professional soldiers who value conformity over innovation see an opportunity to reassert control. The long patrol has been a triumph of the spirit, but it has also exhausted the physical and political capital of its commander. Carlson stands at a crossroads, having proven his theories on the battlefield only to find that his greatest fight may be with his own superiors. The final pre-climax turning point arrives as the raiders are officially pulled from the front lines, and the whisperings of a major reorganization, one that would strip Carlson of his command and dismantle the raider identity, begin to circulate through the tents of the high command. Before we move on, please subscribe to our channel, Operation Zero. Don't forget to hit like and share this with fellow audio documentary enthusiasts, especially those who love military history. Let's continue. The withdrawal from the front lines of Guadalcanal marks the beginning of a different kind of battle for Carlson, one fought in the corridors of power and the restrictive confines of military tradition. As the raiders arrive at the rest camp on Espiritu Santo, they are shadows of their former selves, haunted by the memories of the jungle and weakened by the persistent grip of tropical fevers. For Carlson, the physical exhaustion is compounded by the growing realization that his experimental unit is viewed with increasing hostility by the Marine Corps establishment. The rumors of reorganization are no longer mere whispers. They have solidified into a concerted effort to dismantle the very foundations of the Gung Ho philosophy. The High Command, led by officers who value uniformity and rigid hierarchy above all else, finds the egalitarian nature of the 2nd Raider Battalion to be an affront to the established order. They argue that elite units create a drain on the best personnel and damage the morale of the regular infantry. But beneath these logistical concerns lies a deeper discomfort with Carlson's radical ideas about social equality and democratic leadership. The first major blow falls when the Marine Corps decides to consolidate the independent Raider battalions into a single regiment. While this move appears logical on paper, it is designed to strip Carlson of his personal influence and bring his men back under the control of traditionalist officers. Despite his protests and the undeniable success of the long patrol, Carlson is eventually relieved of his direct command. He is sidelined into advisory roles and sent on special assignments that keep him away from the men he trained with such devotion. This separation is a profound blow to his spirit, as he views the Raiders not just as a military unit, but as a living demonstration of a better way for men to live and work together. He watches from the periphery as the unique culture he fostered is slowly eroded, replaced by the very caste system and blind obedience he sought to abolish. The war, however, does not wait for bureaucratic resolutions. In late 1943, Carlson is assigned as an observer for the invasion of Nicaragua, an operation that will become one of the bloodiest chapters in the history of the Pacific. He stands on the deck of a transport ship, watching the relentless bombardment of the tiny island, his mind racing with the tactical lessons he learned in China and Nicaragua. When the assault begins, he witnesses a catastrophe that validates his worst fears about traditional military planning. The landing craft becomes snagged on the jagged coral reefs under a murderous hail of Japanese fire, and the Marines are forced to wade hundreds of yards through chest-deep water while being torn apart by machine guns. Carlson ignores the safety of the command ship and hitches a ride on a boat heading into the chaos. He spends the next several days on the fire-swept beaches, moving among the terrified and dying young men, offering what little comfort and direction he can. He sees the staggering loss of life, nearly 1,000 Americans killed in just 76 hours, and he is filled with a cold, righteous anger. He believes that many of these deaths could have been avoided if the leadership had prioritized flexibility, individual initiative, and a deeper understanding of the enemy's defenses. Following the carnage of Tarawa, Carlson is once again sent back to the United States, this time to recover from the physical and emotional toll of the observation mission. He uses his time in the hospital and on leave to speak out, though he must do so within the bounds of his rank. He continues to correspond with the White House, providing his candid assessments of the tactical failures he has witnessed. His letters to Eleanor Roosevelt and the President remain his only shield against the senior generals who wish to see him permanently silenced. However, the political climate in America is shifting. The early wartime unity is giving way to the first stirrings of the Red Scare, and Carlson's past associations with the Chinese Communists are being scrutinized with newfound suspicion. His public warnings about the post-war world and his advocacy for social justice at home lead many to label him a radical or a subversive. The man who was once a celebrated hero is now viewed by many in the government as a political liability. Despite the growing controversy and his declining health, Carlson's warrior spirit remains undiminished. He insists on returning to the Pacific for the invasion of Saipan in the summer of 1944. He is once again serving as an observer, but his nature compels him to be at the point of greatest danger. During a particularly fierce engagement near the base of Mount Tapachao, he sees a young radio man lying wounded and exposed in a field swept by Japanese machine gun fire. Without a second thought for his own safety, Carlson rushes forward into the open to rescue the boy. As he reaches the fallen soldier, a burst of fire catches Carlson in the arm and leg, shattering bone and tearing through muscle. He is dragged to safety by other Marines, but the wounds are catastrophic. The machine gun bullets have done what the jungles of Nicaragua and the snipers of Guadalcanal could not. They have finally ended his career as a combat soldier. The journey home is a long, agonizing ordeal of surgeries and slow recovery. He spends months in naval hospitals, his body a map of the scars earned in 3 decades of service. During his convalescence, he learns that the Raider battalions have been officially disbanded, their men absorbed into the newly formed 4th Marine Division. The Gung Ho experiment is over, at least in its formal capacity. Carlson feels a profound sense of loss, not for his own career, but for the missed opportunity to transform the military into a more humane and effective institution. Yet, even as his physical strength fades, his intellectual fire remains. He spends his final years writing and speaking, advocating for a world based on the cooperation and mutual respect he saw among the soldiers in the mountains of China. He becomes a vocal supporter of the burgeoning civil rights movement and a critic of the burgeoning Cold War mentality, positions that further alienate him from the military establishment. In 1946, the Marine Corps finally forces his retirement on medical grounds. He is promoted to Brigadier General on the retired list, a standard gesture for officers wounded in combat, but it is a hollow honor for a man who has been systematically stripped of his influence. He settles in the quiet beauty of Oregon with his 3rd wife, Peggy, seeking peace in the woods and rivers he loved as a child. However, his heart, weakened by years of tropical disease and the relentless stress of his various crusades, begins to fail. He suffers a series of heart attacks, each one leaving him more fragile than the last. Even in his final days, he remains focused on the future of the country, expressing his hope that the spirit of Gung Ho might one day find a place in the hearts of all Americans. Evans Carlson dies on May 27, 1947, at the age of 51. His death is noted with respect by the public, but the Marine Corps leadership provides only the most perfunctory of tributes. He is buried in Arlington National Cemetery, surrounded by the thousands of young men who served in the wars he fought and predicted. In the decades that follow, his legacy undergoes a slow and complex transformation. While the specific structure of the Raiders was dismantled, the principles he pioneered, small unit autonomy, specialized training, and the use of unconventional tactics, eventually become the cornerstone of modern American Special Operations Forces. The Green Berets, the Navy SEALs, and the modern Marine Raiders all carry a portion of his DNA, whether they realize it or not. Beyond the military, the phrase gung ho enters the American lexicon, though it is often misunderstood as a call for mindless enthusiasm rather than the ethical harmony and shared responsibility Carlson intended. He remains a singular figure in American history, a minister's son who became a master of war, a scholar who sought the truth in the midst of battle, and a leader who believed that the strength of a nation lay not in the power of its weapons, but in the character and equality of its people. The story ends with a final image of the restless seeker having finally found his rest, while the echoes of his unconventional spirit continue to resonate through the ranks of those who choose to lead from the front and live by the principle of working together in harmony.